Production Select Committee, I'm very pleased to take a call on the Dairy Industry Restructuring Raw Milk Pricing Methods Bill, second reading. And Labor, of course, does support this bill. It flows on from the Dairy Industry Restructuring, which we as a government undertook some 9 years ago. And I'd like to concur in the comments around the chairing of the Select Committee by Shane Ardern. He does a good job as chair, and perhaps he should be the Minister of Agriculture.
Well, the chair of law and order.
And perhaps Colin King should be the Minister for Small Grains and Seeds in support. But the main purpose of this bill is around replacing the current regulated pricing formula that independent processors pay to Fonterra for farm gate prices, and to add a 10 cent per kilogram of milk solids premium, if you like, to that. I should just say at the outset that I don't need to declare a conflict of interest on this issue. Unlike Shane Ardern, I don't have a involvement in the dairy industry, but I guess I do have a connection of kinds that I do need to declare. My daughter is getting married on Saturday, and her husband-to-be is the son of a dairy farming couple from Northland who've recently retired. They're good people. They're not of my political persuasion, but they were loyal Fonterra suppliers. Yes, there's a little irony in all of this, because over a couple of glasses of wine one night after we first met, I remarked how Fonterra really was a good socialist organisation, and they balked somewhat at this description. But of course, as I reminded them, the dairy farming industry was in dire straits in the 1930s because of the activities of the then predecessor to the national government. And Mickey Joseph Savage and the Labor government came in, and they delivered to that industry loans. They provided guaranteed minimum prices. They supported the expansion of the cooperative system, a good socialist system which has seen that industry grow and grow and grow to the point where today it is our biggest single export earner. And that's a great thing to see. And I've got to declare my support for Fonterra. It is 100% New Zealand owned, and long may it continue to be so. Long we would rue the day where we saw changes to see foreign capital flowing to Fonterra, because it would start a whole chain of events which I think would be cataclysmic for New Zealand and its potential. I acknowledge the growth the Fonterra has led in the dairy industry in my region of Canterbury and Southland, and that might sound a little curious for somebody who is known to be very, very strong in terms of issues such as water quality. But I have to say this, that whatever issues we have in water quality, certainly any contact I've had with Fonterra and its leadership, there has never been one in the senior team who's ever said anything other than being absolutely committed to improving the current water quality in my region of Canterbury, or indeed working with their farmer base to try and lift that quality. And I think if we have a New Zealand-owned entity like Fonterra, I think we have an odds-on chance of getting the balance right, even with less positive events in the House earlier today. The Fonterra Clean Streams Accord may not be delivering the sort of progress we want to see, but it's certainly a lot better than nothing, and I do commend Fonterra for its support for that. It's certainly a question around whether we would see the same sort of commitment if we went to an industry where we had a growing profile, and it's a valid question to be asked, and I do pose it in the House, whether we had a strong and growing profile of foreign investment, because I believe when you've got a commitment over the generations to New Zealand through the farming cooperative system that Fonterra represents, that does see the sort of commitment that represents outcomes in environmental values as well as the bottom line. And I think that is truly important, because Fonterra is indeed the jewel in our economic crown. It is our single biggest export earner. It level pegs at times with the tourism industry, one has to acknowledge. And there obviously are some tensions between those two industries which we have to get right, because we want to see both in respect of our revenues and export income receipts. But I think that New Zealanders need to know just where the government's going to stand on that issue on Fonterra's capital base. Is it going to take a position of following market ideology and seeing a public float of Fonterra's shares? because I think that would be a really backward step. That would, and the pressure is on. We've seen proposals to float on the share market, which luckily the Fonterra shareholding stakeholder base managed to thwart, but the issue will come up again, and I think that we want to see Fonterra held in New Zealand hands and using its own shareholder base as the way to create some new capital for it. There has, of course, been some considerable commentary in the last week about the Chinese company with $1.5 billion to spend around purchase of New Zealand farms and infrastructure. And I believe one of the intended targets for them would be the Synlait company based in Dunsandel, which was set up as one of the offshoots of the dairy restructuring changes that we introduced as a government back in the early 90s. I visited Synlait last year, and I have to say, as somebody with no real deep understanding and knowledge of the dairy industry and how it operates, I was surprised to see Fonterra tankers pulling in and out of the Synlait plant in Dunsandel, as well, of course, as their own trucks. Although I think the Fonterra ones outnumbered them. And it was explained to me that was the basis of the dairy restructuring, that Fonterra was obliged to supply milk to Synlait. And of course we now begin to understand through this bill that the basis of that has been uneven. It's been tilted a little much in favour of the competition that the Dairy Restructuring Act provided for, and what this bill is addressing is bringing back some measure of balance back into the equation. So they pay a premium of 10 cents per kg of milk solids to ensure that that gives them competitive reasons to go and provide their own facilities rather than simply, if you like, milk the tit of the Fonterra machine. One of the concerns I have around the future of the industry relates to the Overseas Investment Office. And last year, one of the first acts of this government was to see some weakening of the overseas investment rules. Now, I think that's a concern. We all acknowledge the role that foreign capital has played in the creation of our nation and continues to play. We're not talking about shutting the gate, but we have to be judicious about the way we allow foreign investment to flow into this country, as any other nation is. And if we were to see a loosening further in respect of our dairy industry, then I would believe that would be detrimental to New Zealand's interests. At the moment, I think the landscape is tilted in the favour of the foreign investors anyway, because our monetary policy settings really give them interest rate advantages over other domestic New Zealand capital. And it brings to mind the call that this party has made, Labor has made, about some reconsideration of current monetary policy settings. I was interested to hear the comment from Shane Ardern about the percentage of exports that Fonterra now commands at 84%, I think was the figure he used. And that surprised me a little, given that we know that Fonterra still holds about 92% of the industry in terms of, I think, the milk flows. So obviously the Dairy Restructuring Act has created the competition. It's truly there in place. What this bill is trying to do is make sure that those suppliers of raw milk don't continue to give rival companies some sort of competitive edge, that we have a flow through the season which doesn't see them given really all the benefits of being able to buy through the season at prices that really aren't available to Fonterra itself. They obviously enjoy the peak of the season prices. And I just wanted to note in conclusion that this bill is around making some change to the wholesale milk price. It is to say that 10 cents a kg will be added. I think it's a sensible, solid move towards assisting Fonterra. It's a rebalancing exercise. It's an appropriate way to try and ensure that we maintain this jewel in the crown, to keep it functioning, to keep it producing, to keep it delivering export receipts for New Zealand. Yes, we want the competition there. It's got a place in the market, but we don't want the market, the field tilted in such a way that we give an undue competitive advantage to organisations who, let's be blunt about it, some of whom don't currently have foreign shareholding, as they certainly have more foreign shareholding than Fonterra, we hope, would ever have. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.